You gotta love those parts in movies where you get this absolutely badass shot of something that's gonna go down in history as an iconic monster and then we never see it again. But sometimes that's half the positivity about it, is because it's so rare and doesn't get shown too much that it stands out the most. With that in mind, I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture, and here are awesome movie monsters only in one scene. Number 9. Watcher in the Water, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Lord of the Rings saga is replete with all sorts of creatures that don't get big screen time in the mainline entries. I mean, even the giant freaking wizard slaying Balrog doesn't get more than a handful of appearances across 2 of the 3 movies, with most of the monsters in Middle-earth, from Shelob to the Mouth of Sauron, having one big moment before fading into obscurity amongst the mammoth set pieces. One such monster that made quite the splash for all of a scene is the Watcher in the Water, an entity dwelling in the dark body of a lake before the doors of Durin leading to Moria. Disturbed by stones being thrown into its depths, director Peter Jackson utilizes POV shots and a burgeoning soundtrack to let us know that all is not as it seems underneath the surface before busting out of massive tentacles that latch onto Frodo. From here, the Watcher seems something like Tolkien's take on a kraken, only more mean looking, pulling itself onto land with such force that it crumbles the doors of Durin, but with a slap of its noodly limbs. He might be a little CGI around the edges, but this ancient evil is enough to make anyone shiver in their mithril shirt. Number 8. The Wendigo, Pet Sematary 2019. Where most every other entry on this list is a positive portrayal of an excellent, memorable monster, there's got to be one exception to the rule, and it's the Pet Sematary remake of 2019 that has a monster that appears for literally seconds when it should have been a far larger part of the narrative. Where the novel focuses on a Wendigo as the supernatural force bringing both animals and people back from the dead in the titular Pet Sematary, in which buried bodies can be resurrected for a terrible price, neither the original movie nor its 2019 counterpart play into this creature's powers particularly attentively. The 2019 movie does its best by showing but one glimpse of a sketch in a notepad, but the subsequent shadowy creature watching through the trees when Louis buries his daughter Ellie is all that we get to actually see of it. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment stipulated by some eerie noises and feels very far too easily missed for something that's such an integral part of the narrative. Considering how much creepy fun the film could have had with a skeletal deer monster inhabiting the edges of the clearing, this feels like a little bit of a cop-out. Number 7. Carnictus, King Kong. Whilst most monsters with only a small chunk of screen time have us desperately hoping for another glimpse of what original fascinating creations movie magic has conjured up, the Carnictus of King Kong have entirely the opposite effect through their brilliantly disgusting design work. Appearing in the infamous insect pit scene, one that was lost from the original movie but reimagined by Peter Jackson for his 2005 remake, the Carnictus are the undulating, wormy, flaccid dick-looking monstrosities that slowly envelop poor sailor Lumpy limb by limb as he attempts to escape with his life. Spoiler if you couldn't tell from the clip, he doesn't manage it. Death by sentient disembodied dong really is the most awful way to go. The Carnicts are not pretty, they're not smart, and they're not nice. Essentially a stomach with a toothy maw for a face that consumes endlessly among its giant insect pals. Of course, the Wetarexes, or the Arachnoclaws, or the Deplectors all get a shout out for their one scene to shine too, but by God, it's an act of mercy they don't have more screen time. Number 6. Hydra and the Children of Hydra's Teeth, Jason and the Argonauts. Honestly, this whole entry is just going to be a love letter to Ray Harryhausen's special effects work, since the man made Dynamation a bona fide work of art over his years sculpting monsters for painstaking stop-motion sequences. It would be remiss not to nod to his one-scene specials that were Medusa and the Kraken in Clash of the Titans, or the Naga and the Rock of the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Really, but Jason and the Argonauts' sublime creations are the ones that really take the fleece on this one. The Bronze Guardian Talos is first to have his one scene and done, a behemoth statue that defends Crete from those that would steal its treasure. And whilst the towering giant is impressive, he's all but blown out of the water by later in the film when we meet the many-headed Hydra. Jason is forced into a choreographed fight with a serpentine creature, attempting to slay it with a sword. Whilst he does eventually win their dance, the teeth of the Hydra are taken and strewn across the ground to create the Children of the Hydra's Teeth, a band of skeletons animated over a period of 4 months to fight against Jason and his gang in one final showdown. Both scenes are breathtakingly impressive, impressive and have an eerie quality of uncanniness about them from the meticulous stop motion work which makes them all the more spooky. If any one man has contributed incomprehensibly to movie monsters that deserve endless celebration, it has to be Harryhausen. Number 5. The Rancor, Return of the Jedi. If the previous entry didn't convince you that practical monsters are the best of the bunch, the Return of the Jedi's Rancor definitely will. Appearing for what feels like nothing more than an extended cameo underneath Jabba's chambers, the Rancor makes a meal of one unfortunate guard before setting his sights on Luke Skywalker, who's also been dropped into his death pit. What makes the Rancor so great as a monster largely comes from its initial sinister reveal, appearing from behind a metal door that looks like a giant toothy mouth with only a glimmer of its eyes and fangs visible in the darkness. Stepping claws first into the light, the sickly crunch of the Gamorrean beforehand only belies how powerful this hulking behemoth is, making Luke's defeat at the thing even more of a cause for celebration when he bests it with his own mechanical trappings. Jabba's Rancor only gets a few brief minutes in the spotlight, but it's one of the most beloved and revered monsters populating the Star Wars universe. If this beastie didn't stick with you as a kid, you're watching the wrong movies. Number 4. Angel of Death, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. Guillermo del Toro's taste for the weird feels almost unquenchable, with his abstract creations making for some of the most uncomfortable and impressionable characters in film history. The Angel of Death from Hellboy 2 fits that mold perfectly, both an incredibly strange figure, but instantly compelling in its presentation, slotting into the Hellboy canon as easily as a giant red demon and his humanoid fish pal have from the very beginning. The Angel of Death is a del Toro creation that primarily toys with the vision of its creepy effects, having its eyes grow from the wings coming out of its back and a hard, chitinous plate in the place of having eye sockets and a forehead. Skeletal in its figure, whilst having a flair for the dramatic and enjoying a particularly creepy cadence, the Angel of Death is a wonderful example of the magic that Del Toro and Doug Jones make when they get together. The Shape of Water and Crimson Peak, another two examples the pair have under their weird and wonderful belts. Number 3. Stanley's Head, It, Chapter 2. There's no way this can be mentioned without special homage paid to The Thing, the founding place of all things spider monster, crafted from poor Norris's head in John Carpenter's 1982 movie. The Norris Thing head is worthy of an entry all of its own, of course, alongside every other unique, twisted iteration of the alien thing that it takes on during its time terrorizing a remote Antarctic research base. But let's celebrate spider heads the world over with a more recent addition to that one-shot list of creepy crawly noggins. After all, the assimilated monster might have been the first instance of a decapitated human head running around on 8 arachnic blades, but it certainly wasn't the last. Paying special reference to the seminal classic, director Andy Muschietti transforms Stanley Uri's lonesome head into another skittering horror show during It Chapter 2's runtime, especially effective both for its excitable throwback as well as the deviation from Stephen King's source material. What was supposed to be a stationary head in a fridge turns into a child's rampaging bonce roaming free in one of the most sickly shapes that it takes on across the movies. Both a welcome surprise and a terrifying vision in one gruesome blow. Number 2. The Trench, Aquaman. Arguably the best part of the movie for its dark tone and incredible execution, this moment just proves what a forced director and horror aficionado James Wan is in the industry when he's allowed to do his thing. Of course, the trench scene of Aquaman is one of the most memorable points, depicting Arthur and Mera besieged by a terrifying, spiny group of monsters from the deepest part of the ocean. I'll be honest, there's one single shot that gives a vague look at these fishy fiends early on, but really, we don't actually see them in full until their big moment, so they're coming on the list all the same. Humanoid deep-sea fish that have regressed from Atlanteans, the trench move like a giant ant farm as they pulsate together under the waves, hunting down any and all that would venture into their territory above the resting place of a powerful trident. Embodying everything creepy about the deepest and darkest parts of our oceans, the trench are suitably scary as the monsters of this universe as well as remarkably destructive, providing a real threat in a comic book movie that can often feel as if its superpowered inhabitants are invulnerable. Number 1. The Pale Man, Pan's Labyrinth. Yet another movie that doesn't let up on original monsters with ever dastardly creation thrown up on screen, Pan's Labyrinth is a treasure trove of Guillermo del Toro's most intricate and interesting beasts that need no more than a swift feature to solidify them into horror history canon. Whilst the faun and his fairies are some of the most eerily enchanting that crop up throughout the narrative, it's the monsters that drop one-time only appearances during Ophelia's tasks that remain the most terrifying. The giant toad is a nice chunk of weirdness, but it's again Doug Jones's The Pale Man that has long been revered as one of the best original monster creations that only ever appears in a single scene. And of course, one of the most downright scary of them all. Emaciated, skeletal, and pale, as the name suggests, really, the creature has no eye sockets but rather little holes in its palms that he pops his eyeballs into, hunting Ophelia with splayed fingers in a sick rendition of reindeer antlers across his face. Feasting on fairies and children alike, the Pale Man is evil incarnate, and his appearance is only strengthened by how little time we actually spend with him. 5 minutes. 5 minutes too many.